Hey, this is Gaming Through the Ages, and today we are taking a look at Devil Summoner Soul Hackers for the Sega Saturn. Soul Hackers is a game in the Shin Megami Tensei series. Actually, it is a game in a spin-off to that series known as the Devil Summoner series. It is the second game in the Devil Summoner spin-off series. However, you do not need to play the first title in order to understand Soul Hackers. It was released for both the PS1 and the Saturn. I have heard that the PS1 version is slightly enhanced, and having seen some of its graphics does look a little bit more impressive, but I have not played it. Now, this is a Saturn import, and the PS1 version is also an import. Both versions are entirely in Japanese, and it is a very text-heavy game. A lot of the game is spent talking to other individuals and reading. The reason I am reviewing it despite the language barrier, which is quite intensive, is that it was recently re-released for the 3DS in the United States. I believe it was released earlier in European territories, but just very recently, within the last few days, on the 3DS in the US. And I have a lot of nostalgia for Soul Hackers, and I say that not meaning that I played the game a lot when I was younger. I actually played it for the first time fairly recently, but for the whole setting and whole motif. It's very cyberpunk, and it's got a very 90s hackers vibe and feel to it. It kind of takes you back to a time when computer hacking was thought to be way kind of cooler than it was, and had like a punk rock vibe to it, and was a real counterculture thing. And it's a lot of fun to experience, especially if you're a fan of cyberpunk, or if you remember that era where people kind of thought of computer hacking as like floating through cyberspace. And it also has a bit of a virtual reality aspect to it, and I was always very interested in the idea of virtual reality, which has kind of died down in recent years, but was always kind of talked about as the future of gaming and the possibilities of virtual reality. And even the cultural implications and morality issues surrounding an idea of virtual reality were often brought up despite the technology not really being there. So in Soul Hackers, you play as a member of the hacker group known as the Spookies, and you uncover a virtual reality town known as Paradigm X, which you can then go around and explore. Much of the game takes place in first-person perspective mode, which kind of lends itself well to this virtual reality feel. And you can wander around Paradigm X, and there's different things you can do in the town, such as visit sort of a virtual museum, you can do a quiz show, you can check the news, and you can go into chat rooms where you can talk to different people in different chat rooms. And it's a very interesting, fun concept, and it's one of the first things you do in the game. And eventually, you realize that Paradigm X exists for the purpose of sort of capturing or harvesting humans, and is run by a company called Argonsoft, and you need to uncover what's really going on and what's happening through computer hacking. And in Paradigm X, you end up going on vision quests, which are given to you, and you play as alternative characters to sort of uncover different aspects of the plot and what has happened in the past. It's a very fun, interesting mechanic, and I always looked forward to doing the vision quests. Now, those are handled like dungeons where you go and fight the enemies, but they're interspersed with dungeons that take place outside of virtual reality, where you can still fight the monsters and things, which are sort of demons summoned from the computer network. And as you progress through the game, various areas are unlocked within the overhead map that you can access and then travel around. And there's a varying amount of different types of dungeons. I won't spoil any of them really, but they do differ. For instance, the first one is an office building, and then the second one ends up being warehouses and then a warehouse which is kind of frozen over because of one of the demons. Now, this game does play like a traditional Japanese RPG with random encounters and turn-based combat. However, it has some elements that are unique to it or aren't common in many RPGs. The human characters are similar to many other RPGs in that they can attack, they can defend, they can either attack with swords or they can use guns. Sometimes they can use magic. But the game has a heavy focus, and this is pretty much true of all games in the Shin Megami Tensei series, is the games have a heavy focus and a heavy emphasis on different elements and different strengths, different weaknesses. And they also add an element where you can negotiate with the enemies to try to get them to join your side. And negotiations can be very confusing and very strange, and may take a while to get used to, regardless of language barrier. They can just be strange and can be difficult to get used to, but they are possible to kind of get the hang of and get into the swing of. However, conversations are also affected by moon phases, which change as you travel throughout the game. And that can sort of add to the confusion because enemies might say something different or react a different way to something you say during a different moon phase. However, if you do get enemies to join you, you can then summon them from your computer, and your computer is almost like a gun-looking thing, which you can add different modules to, which affect your enemy fusion, affect things like your mini-map, and you can spend points to summon enemies from within there, and then you can fuse them together to get stronger enemies. So it's almost similar to, say, the Pokemon games where you can try to collect the different monsters that you fight. However, you can also fuse them together to find different combinations. Now, I mentioned that you have to spend points in order to do this. Well, these are points that are seen underneath your money in the upper right hand of the screen, and they increase after each encounter, but they decrease with each step. If you run out of these points, all of your summoned demons that are with you will very quickly lose their health with each step. Luckily, there is a store in the game where you can exchange money for those points. But that does add an element to the game which can be difficult to overcome if you get into a situation where you're far into a dungeon and need to get somewhere, but you find you're running out of points and the enemies may be, or not the enemies, your demons may be dying very quickly with each step. There are also areas that you can find throughout the dungeons which allow you to heal by spending those points. So this is a unique concept which adds quite a bit of depth that I wasn't expecting the first time I played this game, but I got used to and I did enjoy. Also, the game is quite customizable. Your main characters, or the human characters in general, you get to decide what stats increase at each level. So all in all, this can be a very challenging game. It's definitely got more depth than many other RPGs out there, which is sort of par for the course for any game in the Megami Tensei universe. However, if you like cyberpunk style and you like RPGs and don't mind a difficult RPG, then I certainly think the Devil Summoner games are worth a look. Now, if you're playing them today, even playing the new 3DS version, the game will probably feel dated, not just because of its graphics, although those will feel a little dated, but because of its themes and because of its world. You can definitely tell the game was created in that era, in that kind of mid-90s time frame, and the media sort of portrayed computer hacking as this strange counterculture. However, if you're nostalgic for that time period, or say maybe you find that outlook amusing, then you could certainly get something out of the art style and out of the themes of this game. This game came out around the same time as the original Persona, and like Devil Summoner, Persona was a spin-off of the Megami Tensei series. Devil Summoner was sort of the Sega Saturn spin-offs, and Persona was the PlayStation spin-offs. Of course, this game did get ported to the PlayStation, and they were even considering translating it to English for the PlayStation, but it was turned down by Sony at the time. Out of the two spin-off series, I would argue that Devil Summoner is a more realized game and has an overall much more interesting story. Because the story is really one of the main reasons I'm recommending this game. It's cheesy, don't get me wrong, it has its flaws, it has some problems, but it's fun. For instance, one of the main characters, Hitomi, I believe, gets possessed by one of the demons very early on, named Nemissa, and the whole game, their personalities sort of go back and forth, and you have to talk to both of them, but the character switches. Specifically, her hair changes color to white when it's the demon's turn to talk. And there's a lot of fun, interesting things done in this game like that to keep you invested in the story. So I recommend this game for someone who likes dungeon crawlers, someone who enjoys somewhat difficult but very customizable RPGs, especially if they like the idea of negotiating and capturing different enemies to fight alongside you and then fusing them together, and someone who's interested in cyberpunk, because those interests specifically are the reasons why I have enjoyed this game as much as I have. So if you're an English speaker who missed out on this game because it was only released in Japanese, now that it's out on the 3DS, if you're interested, I recommend checking it out. Just know that it will feel a little bit behind the times.